Good day, Mark here. We're getting a little serious today. A little touchy topic that's everybody's on everybody's mind with today's market. Interest rates, inflation. What about the future? I recently went in with my mom and dad and got their power of attorney and wills all sorted out. What's everybody else doing? Are you ready for the future? I've got somebody online here that I'm excited to talk about. He's been on the show before, and without further ado, Mr. Jim Doyle, welcome back to the show. It's been a while.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
I was thinking on the drive into the studio this morning. Has it been a year or 2 years? I don't recall. But thanks for coming back on.
Again, glad to be here.
We had to bump you too, so sorry about that. It's the summer. There's summer things going on, Jim. Any big plans this summer?
Well, just came back from South Africa.
Oh, wow.
That was a trip of a lifetime. Beyond a trip up to Seychelles, that's as exciting as it gets over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah. What was going on in South Africa? That's cool.
Well, VDDS had a group that went out there to see the animals and meet the people and see a number of African countries and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
And, a trip of a lifetime.
That is a long haul too. I've been to Ethiopia, so I think going there was something like 27 hours in total. Coming home was even longer, 36 hours. And man, oh man, I remember I met my wife, and 3 months later we were on a trip to Ethiopia. And man, what an adventure! It's an eye opener there. There's some beautiful landscape. Kind of untouched by first world humans that kind of tear everything up and build cities, and it's cool, awesome. How are you feeling these days with everything going on, Jim? What's sort of top of mind for you these days? What are clients talking about? What are the top 3 things that you're assessing and helping your folks out with these days?
Well, I think the most pressing one is the cost of living. It's tightening up everywhere, okay? And even if you make a fairly decent income, you're feeling it. And if you're not feeling it, your kids are feeling it, which means you're supporting them financially. This is a dynamic which is probably going to stick around for a while.
Yeah. What are you seeing out there to indicate that it's going to be staying around for a while? What are you seeing?
Well, we're hearing a concept called sticky inflation. So if we go back to the start of the year, all the people that claim the ability to foretell the future, we're talking in terms of it being transitory. And we're certainly seeing that that's not the case. Anybody who's just paid their property tax in Vancouver, has probably seen an increase of 12%. Okay. This money has to come from somewhere. Mm-hmm. And, so when they say the basket of goods is whatever the number is, there's so many things that are excluded that are part of your daily life that the cost of getting by comfortably is becoming more of a challenge.
Mm-hmm. What are we seeing because of that? Like, are we obviously, there's less cash flow for the average family. What about debt? Like, are we using more credit cards? Like, how are people getting by these days?
Well, it's interesting how the number of people that help their kids buy a place, so you go to the bank of mom and dad, they give you a big down payment. Now we're seeing a significant percentage of those kids not able to afford the mortgage payments. So mom and dad are stepping back in again.
Mm-hmm. So what happens when the bank of mom and dad no longer is there to like, what are we going to, is that a large chunk of our, we'll say in BC, is that a large chunk of our population that are, depending on other income sources outside of the established banks and credit?
It is fairly established now. Yes.
Yeah. I know I just we were just talking beforehand too. Like I just sat down with my mom and dad and getting, all the will and the power of attorney all sorted out. Um, what about those folks? Like there obviously there's money set aside for the kids and whatnot. Is that just going to be diminished before the time comes that of their passing? Like where is all these pockets of money going? Is it going to be all dried up? Like what are your thoughts there?
It's a great question. Um, when we talk to a lot of families, particularly when they're more comfortable financially, they certainly want to pass on a sizable portion of that legacy to their children. Um, but education typically gives a benefit of seeing people live longer than
Right.
average people do. So, and we tend to be a little bit more frail in those later years. So we're more likely going to be spending portions of our money that we never thought we would. Um, I spoke to a couple recently who went into an assisted living environment, and they're paying north of $20,000 a month. Now, that certainly doesn't represent all of the cost out there, but for many families, it's a significant outlay. And if you're looking at something like Alzheimer's or something like that, or dementia,
Hmm.
the average stay might be over 9 years.
Right. Now, this like I think this leads into an interesting thing. So, um, what do we need in retirement? Like, what's enough? And now I know you've is $1.7 million. Is that obviously the ball keeps getting kicked down the field. Like, what are the key factors that individuals should consider when planning, retirement in terms of wealth management? Like, what should they be putting away? What should they be aiming for? What are your thoughts there?
Great question. I applaud BMO for bringing out this survey, okay, because it gets people talking, and it has a lot of people asking, well, how much is enough? Okay, uh, which begs the question. For a lot of people, they've got a statement in front of them, but it doesn't relate to what can it do. Okay, what do they need? What do they want? Okay, and in today's highly commoditized world, no one wants to be told, if you fit these parameters, this is what you must do or should do. Everybody wants that tailored to their own situation.
Right.
So the study basically was asking people, what do you think you need? Okay. And the average Canadian was coming back saying, well, 1.7.
Hmm.
And that's a beautiful place to start. Okay. But, most dentists that I talk to, okay, 1.7 is really not going to do the job.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, you want a rule of thumb, and it's just really, really loose. Okay. I talk about something called a sustainable withdrawal rate. And, that's around 4% as a benchmark that we like to use as a number. Okay. So if you take a look at the average dentist, maybe living on, $12,000 a month, give or take. Okay. Um, to get that sort of 4% return, you're probably going to need a portfolio of about 3.6 million.
Right. So we're doubling that.
Absolutely.
Right. Right.
Okay.
Right. Okay, so how can somebody assess their retirement readiness? Like obviously there's a desired lifestyle. What key factors should they be looking at in terms of readiness?
Well, I think it comes down to a couple of key considerations. I think dentists on average work later in life.
Yeah.
So it's not uncommon to see, 70, 71, still working.
Yeah.
Okay. And, that's certainly understandable. You got a big chunk of your life where you're in school, you're not earning anything. So you've got a shorter timeline with which to accumulate uh, uh, those assets to fulfill a longer life in retirement.
Hmm. Yeah. I'm seeing I think it's an enjoyable field to be in. I think the later that these folks are getting into the career, it kind of opens up sort of that mentor phase of the career, and that could be a lot of fun. But yeah, you're right. Like 76, I think, is the oldest clinician I've seen out there, and I've heard and seen that that number is even higher. Um, it's great to be in a profession that you're getting all this fulfillment, right? So, um, what are the potential risk factors, the challenges that retirees commonly face in managing their wealth?
Well, I think one of the challenges is, and I'll say this with as much looking for the right word here. I want to be kind in the way that I say this.
Yep.
Okay, um, I think a lot of dentists are uh, incredibly smart people. Okay, they're scientifically trained. Okay, and as a result, when we look at a lot of this investing stuff, it's like, oh no, I got that. Okay, um, and when you dig a little bit deeper, they really don't got it. Okay, so I think what we want to try and encourage is, you know. Um, taking a bit of a look at what the numbers actually look like. Sit down with somebody who can help model the choices and the options and things that you're looking at and things that are important to you, and see if numbers make sense.
Um, is it smart practice to lock up certain assets, lock up certain pools of money so that it's hard to access? I know RRSPs, obviously you're dinged. It's easy to take money out of a tax-free savings, that kind of thing. What do you recommend there to sort of good habits and protecting the future?
Well, I might be a bit biased in this perspective, okay? Uh, but I'm going to suggest if you're working with a transactional advisor, your financial habits, your spending choices, your cash flow management are probably not things that you're going to talk about, okay? You're probably not going to talk about risk management. You're probably not going to talk about your estate planning in terms of, what happens. And just a little sidebar on that, I really want to emphasize estate planning is not just about who gets your stuff when you die.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's about capacity and transitioning um, before then. So if you've got a spouse, you've got special needs children, you've got other issues to consider. Sorry, I went off on a rant there.
No, I like rants. They're good. Tangents, rants, very
Yeah.
welcome. You're welcome to just kind of explore that. I like that. So, is there any specific investment strategies or allocation approaches that you recommend to retirees to like generate income as they're taking it out? I know you're putting things into a RIF. Um, what do you recommend there that they're still, their money's still making money at that certain point of time?
Well, I think dentists are a little bit unique in that, often I'll get a phone call. Hey, Jim, I got an extra pot of money in my holdco. What can you do with it?
Right.
Okay. And I'm a big fan of being a bit systematic in the way that you treat your money. Okay. Um, for most of my clients that I work with, when we get into RSP season, it's what's left over that wasn't spent on Christmas that can often go into RSPs. And I'm going, that may not give you the best result at the end of the day. So structure a plan, follow the plan, okay, and talk with your advisor every once in a while about what your goals are and how you're going there.
Now, what is the rule of thumb? Is it 10% of your investing? Like what should be that? Like what's the standard benchmark there? Or is it whatever you're comfortable with?
You know, any of the fans out there of the wealthy barber, will have heard, the 10% figure.
Yeah.
Okay. And I think it's a question of, what is it going to take you from where you are right now to get you to where you want to be? So um, if you need 12 grand a month in retirement, inflate those numbers, do the math, okay, and find out whether a 10% savings figure is going to get you there. This is the part that I think is often missing in a lot of these things, So when clients come to me with a nice big statement, they go, well, I think it's in there. I think I'm good, but there's no connection to what this is going to produce or ultimately, things that can set it offside.
Right. Obviously, folks are getting older. We're fortunate here, obviously, in Canada with our healthcare system. But what role does healthcare planning play as well? Like, that's something to consider. Potential healthcare costs. Like, should we be considering that as well in Canada? I know, retirement homes are incredibly expensive. Some of them. What are your thoughts there?
Well, I know for a lot of folks that I work with, uh, when you look at the things that are not covered by the healthcare system, you've got someone, for instance, who has diabetes. Okay, uh, ongoing prescriptions and so forth can get fairly expensive and be consistent over a long period of time. Um, we talk about aging in place, and this is something more and more folks want to see happening so that they don't have to be quote unquote warehoused, in those later years. So do you have the resources to pay for, care and other support services to come to your home to prolong that staying at home?
Yeah.
And that really is a great discussion to have.
I think I could not agree more. I've had family members, I'm sure we all have out there. Those retirement homes, not the nicest place. And did you refer to it as warehousing?
Yeah.
Yeah. That is a good way to put it. If I had the personal choice, finding a way to, and a means to ensure I don't have to go there. It's like a penitentiary there. I feel sad for those folks. It seems like a dismal place to be. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's an outsider's perspective. My grandma went through it. Yeah. Okay, so how could somebody incorporate tax planning into their retirement wealth management strategy? So, how are we giving less to the government after, we have that, that money left to kind of coast into the landing? Like, how do we keep the government's hands out of our pockets there?
Great question. Great question. Okay. Um, I think when you're accustomed to making a single check while you're working, you take your taxes off and you do all the other strategies that you do to mitigate what you've got earning. But once you're a retired dentist, okay, you've got income potentially coming at you from several different sources, okay, and that includes your government benefits and possibly the wind down of your holdco and your RIF assets and so forth. And now the question becomes, what assets do I take in what order? Okay, do I accelerate redemptions and pay more tax now, or do I defer everything? Uh, and this really needs to be tailored to each individual's needs and the resources that they've got to work with.
I like it. I like it. You're full of knowledge, Jim. How can somebody get a hold of you too? Let's go there right now.
Perfect. Jim Doyle at IGPWM. Phone number 604-630-3733. Both of those are great.
Yeah, just throwing that out there, folks listening. Definitely, reach Jim. He's a wealth of wealth knowledge. Sorry. Okay, so just a little sidetrack there. So inflation. This is the pretty one of the hottest topics these days. What strategies can we put in place to address inflation? Especially when it comes to we're aiming for this dollar figure. We're looking at this end dollar figure to be less than it actually is. Like, should we be planning that dollar figure at the end and adding a certain percentile to that? Like, what are your thoughts there?
Well, I think there's a bit of a misconception about what the numbers actually are.
Right.
Okay. If we go back over the past decade, I think we're going to see inflation somewhere around the 2% figure. Okay. But if I take the numbers all the way back to 1945, we're probably going to be closer to 4.
Hmm.
So if you're building a plan that says, what does 2% over the next 30 years look like? Okay. You're building some hurt into your plan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Um, yeah. So, yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's interesting too. Like when you look at mortgage rates back in the '80s as well, it's kind of all relative, I suppose, when you kind of take it and look at it in that perspective. 20% on a mortgage back in the '80s on only it's what percentage of your earnings was that back in the '80s, and it turns out to be not a significant amount comparatively to nowadays, where the 5% is a significant 10-15% more of your income, right? If we're talking about like our dwelling costs on a percentage of our overall spend, right?
Absolutely. And this is the wild card when you're on a fixed income. Okay. Um, a lot of retirees, their biggest expenditure could be their property tax. So if you're on the west side, that could be taking up 50% of your disposable income.
Mm-hmm.
Taxes have gone up more than 5% per year over the past 5 years in Vancouver. Okay. So if that's going to be one of your largest expenditures, okay, then you might want to bump up your expectations and plan to have a bit more resources, as it's a sad thing when you see someone forced out of their home because they can't afford to pay the property tax.
Right. Is there like, in terms of budgeting, are there certain benchmarks that should we be looking at staying under certain percentiles and set budgets? Like, obviously the answer is yes, but do these numbers exist out there? Is that something that you talk to clients about? Like, hey, here's your boat. Like, you like going on trips. Like, make sure we stay within this certain dollar figure. Is that like a healthy way to live?
Within the dental community, the concept of living on a budget is like those are war words. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, I know. Yeah, but I
Yeah.
mean, what are your thoughts there? What's your pushback then? Like, how do you bring them back to reality? What strategies do you put in? Like, what are you saying to these folks?
Well, I think a polite way of kind of approaching this is it comes down to financial priorities. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to spend all your money living well, okay, traveling, there's nothing left over, that's a choice. But there's consequences that come with the choice. Okay. So we talked about the 10% savings, the concept of pay yourself, okay, and then have fun with what's left over, probably not a bad idea. Um, but again, it's about having an openness and a willingness to have these conversations, especially when the income is very good for most dentists and the income stream looks like it's going to go on forever.
Mm-hmm. Um, is there anything that like technology wise that these folks could use to help them manage that? Whether it's a bank app, I know the RBC bank app's pretty handy. Is there something simplistic that they can help themselves monitor these things and protect themselves?
Well, one of the things that I typically like to do is to take stock of where the money is going. Okay, this is not a budget per se. This is just recording and tracking and saying, what sort of financial priorities are on the table right now. So, um, we talk about helping the kids out these days, and that for an awful lot of parents is a significant amount of their cash flow that they don't account for in their budget. So when they look at what's left over, sometimes they're a bit surprised.
Yeah. Yeah. Where did it go? Wait a minute. Oh, yeah. That.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that's out there these days, right? It costs that much to put my kid in that, right?
Yes.
I'm learning those things. Wow. Holy smokes. Childcare is expensive. I would have this much money left over at the end of the year if I didn't have that kid. I'm just kidding. Life would
There's the
be
$10 daycare for you, right?
yeah, that's right. That's my retirement. I'm just training my kids. I'm going to make them dentists so that they can take care of me. It's the roles have reversed now, right? It's
Perfect.
there you go. It's not the bank of mom and dad. It's the nurse children, right? Awful,
Absolutely.
awful, awful. Okay, so what's can you explain the concept of sustainable withdrawal rates in retirement? Like, how are individuals? How do they determine what's like sustainable for withdrawal, especially with all of what we've chatted about in terms of inflation and cash flow diminishing?
I, I think it's a challenge for a number of folks because what can you draw an income from? Okay, uh, are there some things you should take out before you take out other things? Um, I'm also an advocate of considering cash flow. Um, People spend cash flow, so you don't necessarily need to make more income to get more cash flow. So you can spend $100,000 a year, as an example, and not pay any tax if it's coming from capital. Whereas you can take $100,000 of earnings, and see a significant portion of it go away to taxes. So it really is about being tax smart uh, and tax efficient portfolios that go with a bit of advice in terms of the sequence that you're taking assets out and the amount of risk that you're taking in order to get that income.
Right. I like it. Okay. Um, so what options are available to individuals that they've done well. There's no concerns here. They want to leave like a financial legacy to their loved ones, to ensure their own financial security. Like what what options are of it? Like what options should they take? Like what should they decide to do there?
You know, this is going to disturb a few people, but life insurance is one of those things that provides an awful lot of certainty. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
And for higher net worth individuals, using it on the advantages that you can get from a tax perspective are often overlooked because people look at the cash flow and they determine that that's an expense, okay, as opposed to an estate objective that you're meeting or a means of building wealth that doesn't involve the tax man. This is where you really need to rely on your other professional advisors to at least put the ideas on the table and show the modeling of the different choices. And then you can make a better informed decision.
Right. Um, here's the last question I had on mind is, how often should we be putting in the thermometer? Like how often should we be talking to you, Jim? Is that like a quarterly thing, a yearly thing? Um, what's a healthy choice there?
Well, I'm going to put it to you this way if I can. Okay, if you want the 5 minute deal and go on from there, then the meeting it needs to be more frequently.
Yeah.
Okay, um, if you're going to put the upfront time into building, a solid plan, and then the review and monitor process is: am I off track? What tweaks do I need to make? Okay, those can be less frequent. So, um, and when markets change or your circumstances change, it is always a very strong recommendation. Check in with your wealth folks to see changes that might want to be considered.
Awesome. Jim, final thoughts. Like, are how's Joy TV going? Are you still doing the segment on there? Like, how are let's final thoughts here. Like, I want to hear what's top of mind. Like, what do you want to mention to folks out there to alleviate some stress even?
Well, I'm glad you brought that issue up. Stress is one of those things that hammers confidence. Okay, and a prolonged period of volatility, like we've had since the onset of COVID, has a lot of folks feeling less than happy about where they are and where they're going, and they see nothing but dark clouds ahead. Okay, and I think it's an opportunity to reach out to others and say, okay, markets come and go, but the choices that you're making in terms of money you accumulate and so forth, those should be consistent. So if your habits aren't where you want to be, if your confidence is not where you want it to be, okay, talk with your wealth advisor and see things you can do concretely to make your situation better.
Right. It's not all darkness out there, folks. There's good people like Jim Doyle out there to be your financial spirit guide. And again, let's just remind the folks how they can get a hold of you, Jim.
Email at jim.doyle@igpwm.ca or phone 604-630-3733.
Awesome. Jim, it's half an hour. I'm going to be cognizant of your time. Thank you so much for coming on again. We'll have you obviously on. We'll talk to you on a regular basis. We need to bring you in, right? We need to talk to our financial advisor on a regular, right? Thank you so much for coming on, and have a great weekend.
This has been fun. Thanks again.
All right. Take care.
Bye.